Martin, I think we can go ahead and kick things off. Still have people funneling in, but we can just get started, and they'll be joining in the first couple minutes here. So, welcome everyone. Today we are excited to present on SMS consumer trends from a recent report that we ran with BSG. We have Martin Payne here, our CEO, and we're both looking forward to touching on some interesting stats and trends in the SMS space. So, quick agenda to get things started off. We'll do an intro and hop right into the consumer trends and some texting trends that we've noticed from our own personal data here at TextUs, and then touch on TextUs top 3 for avoiding opt-outs and just overall SMS cleanliness, and then go into a Q&A. So without further ado, Martin's going to be presenting today. I'll hand it off to him in just a second, but first, quick housekeeping. We like to make these webinars a lot more conversational versus us just kind of talking at you for 20 to 30 minutes. So at any time, feel free to enter any questions in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen, and we'll touch it either on that slide or at the end when we wrap things up. So without further ado, Martin, I'll hand it over to you and let you get started.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to everyone for joining. Really excited to have you on the webinar and share these insights that we have. First, before we dive in, however, let's talk a little bit about the background of the information that we'll be sharing today. Benenson Strategy Group is a partner of ours. They're a customer of ours. They are a strategic marketing consulting firm, and their clients is typically Fortune 500, and they also do political messaging and market research as well. They are part of the WPP family of companies, and they're full service from market research all the way to strategy development and execution. So they conducted a study of the US general population, meaning it's coverage of people 18 years and older across various socio demographic categories, and it's supposed to be a representation of just the general US population. And one of the ways they were able to get there is by conducting a survey of over 1,000 people. And so when you get 1,000 people, you're going to be pretty representative of the country. This was fielded in May through June of 23. And yes, we did use texting to get some of these survey completes, and it was quite effective. TextUs, we're a business texting software company. We offer branded and white label apps that allow people to text integrated with their system of record, or text when it's white labeled, it actually gets white labeled inside of the CRM or the ATS. We're predominantly there to drive engagement with consumers, candidates, workers, and we're private equity backed. I think where we lend insights to this study, we have thousands of customers, tens of thousands of users. We've been around for a while. We've sent over 1 billion SMS messages. We have over 100 million contacts. And so by joining forces with Benenson Strategy Group, they conducted the survey. We provide data, anonymized data from our database, and we give you a holistic view of insights here that we're happy to share with you. All right. Let's talk about general trends among US consumers. So the macro trends increasingly favor SMS. There are more consumers that own smartphones than they own computers, both desktops and laptops. So computer ownership is at 74% based on the sources we have below, versus 93% on the smartphone side. And then just in terms of open rates, this is no surprise. We just all know through our own personal experience that people open SMS messages more so than emails. There's just so much spam that comes in email that we really don't get to all of it. We end up selecting a bunch and deleting a bunch and whatnot. What is a bit surprising, though, is the disparity, the actual numbers themselves. Virtually every SMS message gets read, 98%. So vast majority of SMS messages get read. Not so much for email. Email's hovering in there at about 22%. And these numbers are actually holding pretty steady based on prior experience. This was the one that it surprised me, frankly. So we asked people, in essence, please characterize your usage of SMS. Do you use it some? Do you like to use it? Is it your go-to method of communications? And shockingly, 63% of people said this was their go-to method for daily communication with people they know, over everything else. That's a staggering number. 63% of the US population says that texting is their dominant form or go-to method of communication with people. Had no idea where this was going to land. That's a really big number. And only 2% of people ignore text. So that substantiates the 98% read rate that we see with texting. So why is SMS preferred? Predominantly due to the time efficiency. It's just so much easier to respond to a text than it is to respond to a phone call or sort through your inbox, which has a ton of spam, read through a long email that's going to take more time to read through than a text. There's just an inherent advantage with SMS. And so we had 77% of respondents say that text messaging is just easier for them in that regard. They also said 42% of them said that text messaging is also a good way to save time when interacting with companies compared to phone or email. So there's an advantage here. Generally speaking, for SMS, there's also an advantage here in regard to businesses communicating with consumers.
Yeah, and Martin, this 42% surprised me a little bit because you got to think with the larger landscape, you're getting, an increase of text from organizations, but you're also getting an increase of potential spam text. I think everyone's gotten text from, X political party or, a sale going on at a store maybe you haven't even ever shopped at. So I was actually surprised at that 42%. It was higher than I would have thought within the larger group. So it's interesting.
Yeah, agree. Another surprising insight. So MMS has become highly prevalent. We all know that people include emojis and pictures and whatnot. What's interesting about surveys like this is you find out the degree. It's quantifiable and it's really high, particularly among the younger demographics. The youngest demographic includes 79% of their messages with emojis and rich media. Followed pretty closely behind by the 30 to 49 demographic at 75%. But even the older folks like me, I'm in the yellow demographic there, as well as our boomers here at 65 plus. Pretty high number are using rich media and various ways of enriching the basic text message with things that just make the conversation more engaging and more expressive. So general US consumer trends, now we move to business trends. So businesses and organizations are increasingly engaging consumers over SMS. We knew this was true. What's a bit surprising here are the percentages. Pretty much across the board, whether you look at for-profit, you look at nonprofit, you look at volunteer organizations, these organizations are sending text to consumers. And consumers are by and large being engaged with by organizations and companies over text. The data would suggest in the study that they're not being overwhelmed because there is frequency data in the study as well. And the frequency data would suggest that the text messages range from infrequent to monthly. In some cases, it's weekly. We'll get into that a little bit later, but to various degrees of frequency, these organizations are definitely engaging consumers over text. And so I think one of the key takeaways here is if you're not doing it, you really should consider doing it, given that it's the dominant form of daily communication. They stated it earlier, and virtually across the expanse of organizations that consumers come in touch with, they're texting consumers. So I think this is an insight that would say, hey, we should at least consider it, think about it. And the reason why this is happening is it's time efficient, as we mentioned earlier. It's just a really efficient way to get in front of the customer, especially given the fact that you're going to get a 98% read rate. Your message is going to land and be read by somebody. Now, response and opt out, that's another matter, but you're definitely going to get to them. So this is where we've got some improving to do is businesses reach out to consumers. Only 40% of consumers found the messages useful. It's not a great number. I think that number lends itself to improvement. 36% of people don't find the messages useful. So I think, there's an opportunity there as an industry, as a group of stakeholders that use texting to reach out to consumers, to really improve the engagement rate here by virtue of making the content more useful. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah. And looking at this one, just in your day-to-day life, for the folks on the webinar, as consumers, just really think about maybe the past 5 random text messages you've gotten from a business or organization. I was looking, preparing for this webinar, and almost every single one had kind of poor, no real call to action. Some included a link, which I'm not going to click on, from a text that I don't know right away. I was pretty sure I hadn't opted in for most of them. So it just goes to show there's a couple things you really have to ensure before you launch any SMS campaign, and that really starts to talk a little bit about the overall, like, one-to-one versus one-to-many, and how you're integrating that into your strategy. So yeah.
Yeah, good point, Mike. There's so many automated messages that come out with very little personalization. So we took a look, the study took a look by industry as well. So there are 5 industries in there that scored above the 42% average, if you will. Healthcare, extracurricular groups and clubs, local schools, local organizations like your K through 12 school or your fire department. Pro and college sports teams do a good job with fan engagement, and then colleges and universities, if they want to attract that younger demographic. I mean, that younger demographic definitely isn't checking email. So texting is definitely the way to go there. Industries that were average or below, product and service companies, which is a lot of the SMS volume comes from product and service companies. A fair amount of improvement that can be made there. Market research firms, political organizations, charities and nonprofits, and volunteer organizations. So we get to opt-outs. One of the reasons why people don't approve necessarily the content is there's a perception among consumers, not the majority, but a healthy enough portion of the minority of consumers don't think that they've opted into receiving messages. And so when they get a message that they don't remember opting in for, they're going to be skeptical of the message. And so opt-in management is really, really important here. If you give a consumer the option to opt out, you automatically put yourself in the category of, oh, these guys are credible. Because, trustworthy, credible organizations will give you the option to opt out if you want to. And so when your organization only requires an SMS opt-out, ensure that all of the first messages have a reply stop in the message or coming right after the message. So that's the first message. Subsequent messages, there's an option with a lot of systems, including ours, to automatically append the reply stop after subsequent messages as well. And then thirdly, we think it's also important to just periodically, not every week, not every month, but periodically, maybe it's once a quarter, maybe it's twice a year, once a year, but just remind people that they've opted into receiving messages and give them the ability to opt out if they desire. It's just being above board. It actually establishes trust and credibility and works to your advantage in the long term. Now, you'll notice as I described in there, I said automated a couple, 3 times. Automation is key here, and having automation that flexes to your requirements in terms of sending opt-out messages to your consumers is really important, because we all know that if we rely on humans to do it manually, by and large, it's not going to happen consistently. Now, when your organization requires an opt-in, not just an opt-out, but an opt-in, your first message should include a keyword that signifies an opt-in. So something like start, reply start to opt-in, reply promos to sign up to our newsletter, reply jobs to see our job list, etc. Having those keywords is a really engaging way to get people to respond back in the affirmative, because those keywords can be tailored to what you think the intent is of the consumer. So that's really, really important. A lot of systems will just automatic, like hard code, hey, it's got to be start. Well, we allow you to put in other keywords, and we think that's a way to draw in a higher opt-in rate. Alternatively, you can use QR codes as well. I don't have it in there, but you can certainly drop a QR code. Have people scan a QR code to opt in as well through their mobile phone. And then only send additional messages once the opt-in keyword has been received. Once you receive that opt-in, follow the opt-out best practices. So just having a well-defined automated process for opt-ins and opt-outs, but then opt-ins if that's what's required, is just really a great way to go here. And like I said, it actually builds your trust and credibility with the consumers.
Yeah, and Martin, we have a question here. And I know we've come across this before. What happens if you send text and they're not opted in? What are some things that can happen from the carriers?
Yeah, so what'll happen is you'll get some people that will opt out. There's an option to opt out at the end of the message. If you don't offer the reply stop, the carriers offer an opt out, in the actual app itself. And that opt out will register with the mobile carriers. And if you get to a certain threshold, it's not well publicized, but based on our data, we see that about a 0.5% opt-out rate is going to put you on the warning list. You're going to get a warning from the mobile carriers that, hey, you need to watch your opt-outs here. And if you get high enough, above 0.5%, there's some threshold above 0.5%, your number is going to get blacklisted. They'll shut you off.
Yeah, which is really very similar to email too, going directly into spam at a certain point if you don't keep up with overall hygiene of your list. So yeah, it's an important thing to note, but good question. And
yeah, so we mentioned that the number, it wasn't the majority, but it's a healthy number. So here it is, 43% of consumers unsubscribe from business SMS messages for 3 reasons. They received too many messages. The messages weren't relevant, and people don't remember signing up to receive text messages. Kind of interesting, right? Because this tells you that opting out, not signing up, is not the number one reason. The number one reason is you're spamming people and your content's not great, right? So even then, when people don't remember that they've opted in, there's some grace that they're going to give you if you're judicious about how often you send the message out. And if your content's relevant or if your content's engaging, they'll give you grace. So let's talk about how to make your content more engaging. Number 3, the TextUs top 3 for making your content more engaging. Mix in your automated messages or your campaigns, which are automated. Mix in conversational messages. I mean, just take a look at the difference in response rate or engagement rate. It's 4 to 5 times greater. And so if you've got somebody who can interlace a conversational message and mix that in with automated messages, your opportunity to drive that up, the overall engagement rate up, goes up significantly. Now, we break this data down by industry, and the optimal mix by industry does differ. But the truth is, you have to mix in some conversational if you want to see a significant increase in your overall response rate. That is the universal truth. And so we advocate just, figuring out a process and a strategy to do that, and you'll see a significant increase in your overall response rate. People like talking to humans. They don't like talking to automation or bots.
Yeah, exactly. We see it. I think we see it in the overall staffing industry. I think they do a good job of balancing it, and it really kind of comes out to 50% campaign to conversational, and I think that's a healthy mix between 40 and 60. It is a healthy mix of campaign, usually getting things started with campaign, blasting one to many, and then continuing conversations one-on-one as they go lower in your funnel. So that's one industry I normally point to that has a fairly healthy mix between the two.
All right, number 2 on the TextUs list: shorter is better, less is more. Give me more time and I'll write you a shorter letter. Pick your favorite term. But we've just found that, just statistically speaking, the numbers don't lie. If you keep your messages less than 100 characters, you will see anywhere from a 2x to 5x increase in response rate. So don't copy and paste your email into text. People don't want that. They want you to synthesize what really needs to be said into basically a short message that gets to the point. And when you're short and get to the point, it's more engaging. And then lastly, this applies to first send messages to contacts. So really mostly to campaigns, because that's what people normally use to reach out to a broad swath of contacts. And this assumes, by the way, that when you send out a campaign, it's personalized, meaning you've got personalization in the campaign, like, hello, first name, your message. That's really important. This presumes that. So once you have that, send text only, which includes keywords, by the way. People love keywords. But send text only. Keyword's nice because it's call to action, and it'll express intent, get your consumer to express intent, which is good, or put in an appropriate image. Those two, if you do those two things, you will see lift in terms of versus the average of messages going out there. Do not send a creepy link in your first text. Links are they're sketchy, right? On your first message. And sometimes you have to, you just have to. But if it's a choice variable for you, wait to send the link. Get some kind of opt-in first, or some kind of positive intent first, which is like, hey, I'm going to text in this keyword, then send a link. And don't send emojis, because this contact doesn't know you. They're not necessarily keen on getting an emoji from someone they don't know. It's a little sketchy, right? And we all know this from personal experience as well. But good text, short, keyword, and a well-placed image. That's a way to get lift on your first text message out to people. So good way to really get your content score, so to speak, well above that 42% that we see in our survey.
Yeah, and Martin, we have a great question relating to content. So asking, can you provide some examples of what the difference between conversational and campaign messages may look like from a content standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an example to share just offhand, but I can describe it to you. We've all seen the campaign messages that we get that are more or less automated messages that come from, one of our favorite brands. if you've signed up to a fan club, the fan club might let you know that, hey, you've got your favorite musician coming in town on XYZ date. I mean, that's an automated message. Something that's going to remind you of a conversational message is something that you would send to a friend or a coworker over SMS. It's going to be shorter, and it's going to be highly relevant because you have a topic to discuss with that person. And so, that's really the best guidance that we can give in terms of what conversational and automated or campaign messages look like. And we actually have a list of templates that you can download from our website. The templates are actually conversational messages where people, have a tendency to have, there's similar patterns in terms of what they say to their contacts. And what they'll do is they'll pull in a template, modify the template that's appropriate to the conversation that they're having, but it still feels, very one-to-one, and a human did write it because they took the template and modified it. But those templates also give you a good idea. Some of those templates will give you a good idea for what a good conversational message looks like. And we can tell you that these techniques work. We're a very data-driven company. We have business reviews with our customers where we go through their metrics. We measure their performance across these 3 criteria. We have other criteria too, but those are really 3 of the top ones. We measure their companies, their users' performance against criteria, and we offer insights and coaching and best practices to try to get them to a point where their engagement rate, their response rate improves over time. And you can see, I mean, it works. It absolutely works. You can see by our customers in the various verticals there, these are some of our top performing industries. They're getting really, really high response rates, as you can see, well above the average. And that's in partnership with them. We do have features, obviously, that support some of these best practices. It's how we have the data on them. But they do a great job of really coaching their users to use our platform in a way that just really drives up the response rate. So really just happy to see the results that a lot of our customers are having.
Yeah, and anytime you see like response rates, or anytime I see it, at least when we're doing these webinars or presenting any SMS data, you kind of start to lose the fact that, you really want to compare this to next up in communication preferences, which is most likely email more often than not. And when you're talking about good response rates for email, anybody on the call that has a line or site into that data, it's maybe, I don't know, 5%, 10%, depending on what kind of messages you're sending. It's just harder and harder to get any response from email. And so, yeah, it's easy to lose sight how stellar these response rates are. From 50% up, it's kind of mind blowing. But yeah, it's great data. And we like to kind of keep these right at the 30-minute mark. So Martin, great job on timing. You hit it right spot on. And we always like to take a little bit of time too at the end here to just open it up to any questions on the data, or just kind of trends or best practices. If anybody's been facing any challenges in their text or SMS strategy, would love to hear any questions. So we'll open it up a little bit, maybe 5 minutes here, and just see if anybody has any questions for Martin or I to touch on. And again, it's just in the bottom of your screen. You can enter any questions there. And Martin, in general, with BSG, do you know when they use text, like when they sent out text in the process to get responses? Was it like for a second line after they sent original emails to get driving them to a link to respond and then send out text?
It was first. Yeah,
first.
It was first because the conversion rate to a completed survey is significantly higher through text than it is with email. And
Hmm.
so we were first choice. And then is they needed to try to close out the study and get additional sample. They went to other methods to supplement, but SMS messaging was the dominant form of data capture there.
Cool. We have a couple questions coming in. Let's see here. Here's a good question. Any data on time of day for best response, or how early or how late is out of bounds? Yes, we do have that
Yeah,
data.
great question. We do have really good data on that. Business hours are really the best time to text somebody. And the reason why that is people are checking their phone throughout the day. The average response rate for us is in the 11 to 12 minute range. From when you send a text as a user to the contact, on average, it's 11 or 12 minutes for them to get back to you, if and when they respond. And so that means they're texting you throughout the day. So business hours, I'd say 9 to 4 is really the sweet spot there. You start to see a drop off outside earlier than 9 and later than 4. You'll see a drop off there. And then weekdays are best. Weekends still work too. It's just the response times are a bit longer. But weekdays work best. There's a little bit of a fall off in the early days of the week in terms of response timing, just because I think people are just more loaded up with work and they have a little bit more time Thursdays and Fridays. So you'll see faster response times then. But I mean, by and large, it's pretty evenly distributed in terms of volume. A little bit more at the beginning of the week versus the later, but it's not really enough to say that it's material.
Yeah, yeah. And it's definitely worth testing within your instance. But I know the data that we have, the graph throughout the day, through your normal 9 to 5 workday, literally kind of just goes like this. And so from the hours of 10 to 2 is when you have best chance of getting a response, which is interesting data. But of course, we always suggest testing it and sending some out really early in the morning, sending some out maybe later in the evening, and just see, because different lists and different groups are going to have different response rates. But great question. Let's see here. Got a couple more in here. And thanks for submitting the questions, everybody. Feel free to continue entering them as well. I have an interesting one here from Chad. Noticing an increase in trend of people sending voice memos via iMessage. Any data on the response rate of voice memos? I don't think we have any data yet. Yeah. That's interesting though. And I definitely notice it in my day-to-day a lot more, just getting voice messages through iMessage. So that's definitely something we can talk to our data team about and see if just overall from a consumer standpoint, seeing if that truly is an increasing trend. It does seem so. I have another question here, Martin. How often would you send messages to any one specific consumer? It's a great question. I think depending on week, month, year, might have a different answer, but
yeah, if we just talk about the average across our user base and our contact base, three is where you want to end it. If you haven't gotten a response by 3, odds are you're not getting a response. And so I'd stop it at 3 and would probably test the frequency. I'd probably say that you don't want to send it every day. You probably want to space it out a couple of days apart. Otherwise, you'll come across as annoying. And also our data would suggest that most text message, even though the average response is like 11 or 12 minutes, there is a long tail there, where some people, as part of that tail, it takes them a day to respond back to the message. And so I'd at least give them 2 days before you send the next message if they haven't responded. But you'll want to test it, to Mike's point as well, because certain audiences for certain types of content may differ.
yeah, Yeah. And that actually kind of brings up one quick product highlight, if I can, is we just released sequences as part of our automation suite, which is really exciting because you're able to kind of test, within a certain group, when you're getting the most responses, whether it's after the first message, second message, third message, you're able to see exactly, fairly rich data on overall response rates. And you might have one sequence that's a 5 message sequence that you randomly get more responses on that fourth or fifth message for a certain group versus 2 or 3. But yeah, I think industry standard 3 is where you want to be before you go back and look at your content, your calls to action, and everything that the message has, to see if you can get a better response. So yeah. Yeah, great questions, everyone. I know we're coming up right at the 40-minute mark, and we really like to keep these between 30 and 40 minutes. So any questions that haven't been answered, we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar is done. And we will be sending a recording of this webinar along with actually the templates that Martin mentioned and the SMS report, the consumer report that we just released. So those will be to your inbox, hopefully by end of day today. But yeah, as always, Martin, thank you for your time, and everyone on the call. Really appreciate the great questions and the insight. And we'll be back probably fairly soon with some more data. So yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.